So the two UDL reflections that I decided to talk about were my Powtoon and my S'more. This is the Powtoon that I created where we had to choose 3 different content standards that pertain to the CPS, UDL, and SJE criteria that we were talking about. The 3 content standards that I chose were: students understand the role of rules and laws in our daily lives and the basic structure of the U.S. government. Here in the subcontent standard, it says describe the lives of American heroes who took risks to secure our freedoms. So in this particular situation, students would be able to choose somebody from history who, fought for freedom, which could be Thomas Jefferson, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr. And these are all different people. I know a lot of students are used to seeing more white heroes, or in history books a lot of people that are talked about are white, but if we use content standards like this in our lessons, students would have the ability to talk about someone who looks more like them and see that they are represented in history despite the fact that they are often overlooked. Another content standard that I chose that promotes diversity and inclusivity was students draw from historical and community resources to organize the sequence of local historical events and describe how each period of settlement left its mark on the land. And then the subcontent standard was trace why their community was established, how individuals and their families contributed to its founding and development, and how it has changed over time, drawing on maps, photographs, oral histories, letters, newspapers, and other primary sources. So this one could easily be based off of any group that the student decides to talk about. So it's not some specific person like the other one that said a person that secured our freedom, or showed an example of someone that secured our freedom throughout history. This could be any it says how each period of settlement left its mark. So this could be any period that the students wish to talk about. So they have the freedom to do that. And then this last standard that I chose to talk about was students describe the American Indian nations in their local region long ago and in the recent past. The subcontent standard is where students would describe national identities, religious beliefs, customs, and various folklore traditions. So this one I aimed more towards the indigenous communities that are often overlooked. A lot of times, well, I specifically remember talking about the missions here in California, since that is California's history. And we kind of put all of the colonizers into this very heroic light, where instead they actually took land from the African American or the Native Americans that lived here before us. So this would be a good content standard to help the students understand more about those communities and those people, and hopefully understand, what really happened despite what they often see in their history books. This would be a very suitable and appropriate standard to base a lesson off of for that specific, curriculum or a specific lesson. And then my S'more was about multicultural education and the multiple intelligences theory. Multicultural education is a diversity-based instructional approach aimed toward reforming curriculum in a way that effectively and appropriately incorporates diversity and culture into the classroom. I remember that this is something that we first talked about when we did our readings, and this is something that really, really stuck with me throughout this entire semester. I felt like I could talk about this all day, but the 5 elements that I put here were content integration, because these are the 5 elements of multicultural education: content integration, knowledge construction process, bias reduction, empowering school culture, and equity pedagogy. This is super important to me because I know that a lot of times teachers don't focus on all their students. It's very easy to get caught up in how busy you are as a teacher, and you don't really put the time set aside to really pay attention to each group of students that are in your classroom. I feel like here where we live, there is a big, or there's a large amount or large diversity that we can see in schools in this area. I know here in Sanger specifically, there is so much diversity, and there always has been. So it's very important for teachers that are in areas with a lot or a diverse student population to pay attention to things like this, because this is what is most important to those students, feeling comfortable in their own skin and teaching other students to be accepting and tolerant and understanding of other people's cultures and not just their own. This is how we create a anti-racist classroom, an anti-racist school environment, by incorporating things like this to empower our children and to, they won't feel the need to be racist because they won't know what that is, because we helped them to accept one another, and we reinforce that in them so they wouldn't feel the need to do anything of that sort. Things like this are really important, and I feel like this more did a really good job of talking about that. And it also talks about the multiple intelligences theory and how different people or students, but people learn in different ways. So these are just the 9 intelligences or 8 intelligences, but there is a 9th one that some people like to include. And these are the different ways that people can learn. And these are really important to know as an educator, because both of these things together will help the classroom, help you as an educator really support the students better. By knowing how the students learn best, you're able to facilitate that in the classroom and implement that wherever you can to help each student learn. And it doesn't need to be all across the board because everybody learns differently. But by knowing these things from the beginning, you'll be able to create that classroom environment that supports the students, to the best of your ability as a teacher. So the 8 intelligences here, I have the 9th one, but the 8 are bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, musical rhythmic, visual spatial, naturalist, and existentialist.